Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first guest episode of So What If Grad School Was Useful? Actually, today's guest chose to be anonymous because there's a very real chance that their employer could hear this podcast. And even though we should all be updating our resumes and our CVs and our cover letters all the time, employers can get a little touchy when you go on a podcast about doing that. So, while respecting their privacy throughout this episode, I did in the intro want to share one very important fact. This person is a former client of mine, a dear friend, and the very important fact is that they are also an award winning and a best selling author. And the reason that I want to bring that up is because a lot of folks that I have worked with on job documents feel a deep sense of shame that they don't intuitively grasp how to do this. And I want you to know that there are several reasons why this is a difficult genre to write in. In fact, I'm going to do a mini episode all about that at a later date, and I hope that you will give it a listen. But for now, the only thing I want you to take away from this is that you can be an extraordinary writer. And you can have a robust sense of what you bring to the table, and it can still be hard to do these things. So please join along today with our very first ever special guest. I hope you enjoy the episode. Please feel free to leave your comments and questions in the commenting space or to email them directly to j.justine.hough at gmail.com. And if you would like to be a special guest, if you would like to come on a podcast episode and work on a cover letter, converting a CV to a resume, converting an academic resume to an industry resume, practicing interview questions, or any other aspect of the job search, please drop me a line. We are currently accepting spots for new guests, and your story and your process could be valuable to other folks in this community. I hope you enjoy this episode. Oh, we're not. Now we're recording. Welcome, welcome. I'm so pleased to have in the studio today one of my favorite people and also
Aw.
someone I've worked with on their resume. And one of the things that is unique about you and why I'm excited to have you here is because I often do this work with people who are converting a full fledged CV to a resume, and that is its own kind of journey.
Sure.
Um, but also if you have worked in higher ed for a long time, even if you have a traditional resume, a higher ed resume can be difficult to translate for non higher ed spaces. And so I'm very
Mhm.
grateful that you have let us use yours as an example.
Absolutely. I just appreciate you taking your time and, utilizing your expertise in that way because it has very much been a journey. There is a lot that I have learned. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, I don't want to sound like I'm fishing for compliments, but I would love to know some of what you have learned from going through this process so far.
Sure, yeah. That's and I again, I don't I mean I don't think it's necessarily fishing for compliments. Like it's stuff it is it is the reason why you are doing this thing for others.
Mm-hmm.
Um and it's a very intentional kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, one of the things I really struggled with is I know like so for example, I have a lot of education. I've been in various classrooms as a student and also as a teacher for quite some time. Um, but translating that experience from the requirements and conventions of a CV to, um, a non-academic resume, and most of my experience and has been in higher ed. In fact, the entirety of my experience, for the most part, has been in higher ed. So translating all of that from academic speak and the fact that it goes beyond just the words, it's even, it's the layout, it's what goes where. That was
Sure.
all very new to me. I never would have known that without your help. So,
I appreciate you saying that. I do, it is interesting. I'm so glad that you mentioned layout because I think
mhm,
oftentimes when folks start this journey of applying to a new space, and particularly the transition from academic to a non academic path,
mhm,
layout is kind of the last thing that we think about. Um,
yeah,
because within a CV, layout is often the last thing we think about. I
mhm,
think there's a kind of common understanding that as long as you have all of the like right sections, you have your teaching, you have your publications,
mhm,
you have your service, the order isn't as important, and some of that carries over into an academic resume. And some of it also has to do with common language. I often say that this process that people engage in of moving from looking for academic jobs, whether they be jobs in the professoriate or another type of job in higher ed, to looking outside of higher ed is an exercise in translation.
mhm,
You
for
said you
sure.
have worked with students for most of your career. And one of the things that a lot of people are shocked to discover is that not only is students not a homogenous term, but the way that you've worked with students translates to different things outside the academy.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
That was very shocking to me. I was like, wait, I can describe that, in that
yeah.
way. But then you think about it, it's like, oh, of course, that makes, that makes sense. Like, um, I think, like when you were talking about the significance of layout, like it made me,
Mm-hmm.
think about how I think in academia, because the focus is on education, that's the first thing you put up on there, right? Like that's the first, like,
Of course,
these are
yeah.
my formal credentials. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna put that up here first, and like because that is the requirements of the context. That's what's important
Mm-hmm.
within that context. But outside of that, to deviate from that layout means you have to put your skills first. And if you only think about your skills as in terms of like, I helped, I assisted students in I don't know, I help students with applying for on-campus jobs or something like that, um, which is a very specific project that you only do often in the context of being on a campus. But when you expand that to what does that really mean, you're helping future employees, potential employees, navigate the workforce or navigate entering the workforce. Like there's so many different ways you can explain that that really reveal the type of skills that are involved in that particular role and action.
Absolutely. That is 100% true. And I was even just, as you were talking about that, I was going through your resume and looking at sort of all of the different ways that you have worked with students. And it really struck me, you have some positions that on the surface look very similar,
Mhm.
and maybe in these different positions for these different institutions, you taught different classes. And so, again, on the surface, your core competencies, you created the syllabi, you put together course materials, you
Mhm.
administered the grades, you led the lectures. However, what you're actually doing in those terms can look very different depending on if you were teaching a interlevel class, which is
Mhm.
more like onboarding new employees in a non-academic
Yes.
sense, or if you were teaching a an upper level class, which is much more similar to doing professional development
Yes.
with young
For sure.
executives, or in your case, if you're even teaching classes about preparing job documents,
Mm-hmm.
right? In which case you're
Mm-hmm.
doing kind of a deep dive on professional development. And while I would never tell someone that to say that they have experience they don't have, you might be able to use that experience to relate to different aspects of a future job. So, for
Sure.
example, applying for a managerial role, as I think you've done a couple times now,
Mm-hmm.
a big part of being a good manager is hiring the right team. And if you have experience helping people put together professional development materials, that will help you in your interview when you talk about how you assess those materials, right? So I would never
Yeah.
say, oh, you've taught people a resume class, say you're an HR expert.
Right.
but but that's one of those good nuggets of,
Mm-hmm.
I can I can break down a resume really well,
Yeah.
and ask good questions. So completely different skills, even though on an academic resume, it's like, well, I worked with students a lot in different
Right.
ways at different
Right.
places.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it's definitely, I think it's, again, like while you were like just describing that and explaining it, it is also such a useful way to prepare for interviews. We can talk about this a little bit, later down the line, but
Sure.
like just that being able to assuage that nervousness, that
Mm-hmm.
pre-interview nervousness, like, oh, I don't know what I'm, like
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know if my skills really fit. Like, no, if you can give those examples and think about it
Mm-hmm.
within it's just the terms kind of get dressed up in jargon for
Yeah.
different industries, but pared down to their essence, it's essentially the same thing, just the specifics might be a bit different.
Absolutely. Um, and I think that, so something you said sparked a thought for me, which is, this is, I think, the place where applying for an academic job is the most different for applying for an non academic job. You mentioned that interview nervousness.
Hmm.
Um, and while interviews are certainly nerve wracking if you're applying for an academic job, um, the academic norm is that the committee that's hiring you knows almost everything about you before you're ever in the room.
Right.
The
Right.
CV,
Yeah.
it stands for, its translation is your life's work. So they have
Hmm.
your life's work. They see where you've gone to school, every class you've ever taught, every talk you ever
Hmm.
gave, before they ever meet you. Right. And it is almost the exact opposite in a non academic space. They have, a one, maybe a 2-page resume. They have a couple of paragraphs in a cover letter. And so I think there is this piece of nervousness if you are used to the academic interview
Hmm.
process,
For sure.
um, where there's almost kind of, well, I shouldn't speak on this because I'm not an expert in it. I will be very upfront about the fact that in my journey of applying to academic jobs, I only ever got one conference interview. So I don't know how most people feel, but I think that there is a confidence that comes from knowing that the committee looked at everything you've ever done and decided it was good
Hmm.
enough that they wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas in a non academic interview, they've seen a very truncated version, and I think there's a different type of fear that is like, will I say something that will ruin their impression of me?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And so
It's a
that's one
good
of the
point.
first
Yeah.
things we do in this work is, understanding that it's a completely different process. Um, and I often, I don't know if this works for people, but I keep using this analogy. I use a movie analogy of, your resume is like the announcement, like your favorite book is being turned into a movie, and these are the people that's starring in it.
Mm.
And you have those feelings about it. And then your cover letter is the first trailer for that movie.
I
And,
like
it goes
that.
into a little bit more depth, it creates a little bit more emotion. And then the interview is the movie, right? So there's
Mm.
a lot
Hmm.
more, you go
Hmm.
into a lot more nuance, you flesh out the story quite a bit more.
For
And
sure.
so, because I think one of the things that I have seen that's because the process is almost completely inverted in this particular piece of it, it's often physically painful for the people that I work with to cut their beautiful, lengthy
Oh God.
CVs
Oh,
down to a one-page resume.
oh, the pain.
It's so hard.
The pain.
It's
Yeah.
so hard.
It's so hard. And I think because again, it is your CV, it is your life's
Yeah.
work. And I think going into this process, understanding the fundamental difference between a CV and a resume, and that one is not more valuable than another.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's because again, as academics, as scholars, so much of your like actual I don't think this is controversial to say, maybe it is, but I mean, so much of your actual self-worth is built into your
Yes.
life's work, right?
Oh my
And
gosh,
so when
yes.
somebody says, I'm only going to read a page of this, you're like, how do
Ooh,
I condense my entire,
right.
like, what do you mean? Like, I can't
Yeah.
condense my soul. What do you say?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's
Right?
such a, like, I know that sounds like very dramatic, but it's, like that was something I've struggled with a lot,
Yeah.
and I still continue to struggle with it. And I think that having these conversations helps make that process easier because you realize it's not personal. It's not. It
Right.
is a pragmatic consideration. People
Mm-hmm.
don't have a whole lot of time to read through your 7-page CV that was already
True.
truncated because it was originally 15 pages. And I'm talking about myself in this regard. Um,
Yep.
but it's really it's yeah, I mean it's hard not to take that personal, but then you have to
It
realize the purposes
is.
of it is not personal. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
judgment. It's not a uh it's not a criticism. It's just you have to condense your life's work into a Polaroid basically.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what a great way to phrase it. Your life's work into a Polaroid. That is so true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is difficult. One of the ways in which I think, so I know I've just, we've talked about how different the process is.
Mm.
I lead a workshop 3 times a year about this process for students. And this workshop is unique because most of the time when I'm working one on one with folks like you, we're working in one direction. We're converting an academic document to be understandable by a broad audience. But I lead this workshop 3 times a year that goes in both directions. So it's for folks who have a resume and are coming back to get their graduate degree and are putting together a CV, and it's for folks who have a CV and are turning it into a resume. So, as different as the process can seem in some parts, the analogy that I use when I'm giving this
Mm-hmm.
workshop for people who are going both directions is that the entirety of your work and your existence is like a gem. It's a gem. And what you're going to show to any employer is a facet of
Mm.
that gem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so in the academic context, when you have the luxury of a 7 or a 15 or a 20 or a 30-page CV, they're seeing more facets, right? And so part of the art of this in either direction is knowing which facet your employer wants to see.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hope that that softens the blow a little bit. It truly isn't personal.
Yeah,
People are not, at least good hiring managers are not hiring their friends, right? They're hiring the people that can do the work.
for sure.
And so you show them that facet. You show them the facet that applies to that work. And there's kind of an understanding that many other facets are going to be left
Exists.
out.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yes, for
That's
sure.
I find that really helpful because I feel, this I think it's the pressure of the convention when you're trying
Mm,
to condense something. It's like, okay, how do I get all of this stuff? Like how do I get every single point to fit, smash every single point to fit into this, this Polaroid, every aspect of my life to fit into this Polaroid or every other facet of this multifaceted gem to fit into this one, and you
right.
can't do that. Like that
No.
is impossible to do. Um, but being able to extract the most pressing and relevant points from, what you know of the requirements for the position, what you know about the larger kind of industry, um, what you know about your own unique skill set. That's kind of what helps guide you to shape that facet from the other the other stuff that's still important but is not necessarily
Hmm.
as relevant to a certain position. That is something that I've really kind of struggled with, is trying to figure out like what, when you have a considerably lengthy um uh CV, like matching up what what experiences, what credentials, what trainings, what, skill sets best match what's being asked for in the job description. And so I think that's one of those things that takes some time and some skill, and thank God for people like you to help folks do that, because it's really hard.
It is hard. It is, thank you so much. It is difficult. It's the work of translation, I think, is never easy.
Hmm.
Um, I think too, in a genre where most people do not read or write often,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's even more difficult. There is a particular problem academics have, um, that I've noticed, which is academics of all stripes really undersell the work that they do.
Yes.
Um, and I think
Whatever do
part
you
of
mean? No, yeah.
I
Yeah.
I know that you're shocked, but just let me explain. Um, so I'm looking at your resume. I'm looking at the resume that we started with, and
Yeah.
it's a very robust and diverse teaching section
Yeah,
here.
thank you.
And of course, and so one of the things that you put kind of when you talk about classes and the work that you did is I'm going to pull a specific bullet point here.
Sure.
You said created syllabi, course materials, and administered all grades. And when you're talking to me or another academic, I know how much work is involved in that and what that means.
Yeah.
But when you are talking to someone who has never done any of those
Hmm.
things, they have no frame of reference for what a monumental task that is.
For
And
sure. For
so
sure.
so one of the things that we did is we kind of broke each of those down into their separate component tasks. And I hope that you don't feel like I'm picking on you because I truly have this conversation with pretty much everyone I work with. But like, what is creating a syllabi, right? Like, what
Right.
goes
Right.
into that?
Yeah.
So off the top, there are the kind of like legal pieces because the syllabus is considered a contract.
That's
Um,
correct. That's correct.
so, there's the legal pieces that the university mandates are in there that we copy and paste. Um, and then there's the pieces that we get to create, um, which take a lot of thought and a
Hmm.
lot of work.
Hmm.
And when you select course materials, um, there is a lot that goes into that. I know,
Oh my God, yeah.
right? So not only are you trying to pull things that will be beneficial to the learning journey, you're often trying to pull things that are accessible both
Correct.
intellectually and financially.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Um, you're trying to structure them in an order where they build on each other a lot of the time. Um, and then, I think administered all grades. Um, this is one that I often work with people quite a bit about because, what does that mean? Well, it means often creating or maintaining a database that
Hmm.
meets federal and state regulations for privacy. Thank you very much,
Yeah.
FERPA.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. God, I didn't even think about that. Wow.
right? In it, and in you're providing feedback, right? Like that's what a grade
Hmm.
is. Like you have
Hmm.
grasped an average amount of this
Yeah.
material, but you're also, providing feedback analysis in a lot of cases. And because I know you as a person, I know that this is how you grade.
Sure.
And I'm sure many other of our listeners grade this way as well. You don't just say, well, you got to see, you're
Right.
average, congrats. You
Right.
say, well, you got to see if you would like to get a B or A in the future,
Sure.
here's what to do. And that is one of the most overlooked, most powerful skills in the non academic world, because you're providing feedback for improvement, which is a managerial or
Mm-hmm.
executive skill. And people are always shocked when I tell them this, but there are people who have trained their whole life to be executives that are so bad at giving feedback that their companies hire executive coaches to teach them how to do it.
Wow.
And one time, out of just kind of curiosity, I had read a book by one of these executive coaches, and her contact information was at the back. And I was like, you know what? Why not? So I emailed her and I said, hey, I'm really curious. How much would it be for me to work with this person? And it was $20,000 a
What?
day.
Wow. Wow. What? What a,
So,
wow.
right?
What am
And
I
this
doing?
is this is so shocking for people, but there are companies out there who are paying this coach and others $20,000 so that she can sit with their executives 8 hours a day and teach them how to give feedback so that their employees actually want to stay and grow and don't just
Yeah.
say F you and quit. And that is
Right.
a skill that most academics have.
That's
Um,
incredible.
yeah, it's no person coming out of academia that I've worked with has realized how truly valuable the skill of grading and feedback truly is. And it is $20,000 a day
A day
valuable.
valuable.
A day,
Wow.
right?
And it just
It still blows my mind.
that's incredible. And even like that, and then also the fact that you have to go through the actual process of assessment and evaluation, right? So you
Right.
first have to understand the material, you have to understand
Correct.
the objectives of the course, you have to
Mm-hmm.
understand how does the work that's actually done match these objectives, and then you have
Right.
to have a system of assessment that
Mm-hmm.
is empirical that you can
Mm-hmm.
repeat and apply fairly,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to be able to that additional feedback piece, like the breakdown of.
Yeah.
It's funny because, like, since we were talking about my CV, I just used the phrase administered our grades because even when I'm writing it,
Sure.
I'm thinking like, God, how do I explain what that is? This is just as quickly as this is as concise as I
Yep.
can put it. Because if I wrote everything that
Absolutely.
goes into it, my CV would be another, that add another 3-4 pages to the
Sure.
to the
Yeah.
document. But a really kind of groundbreaking point. I didn't know that.
Well, and even with what you just said in terms of like, to provide feedback, you have to understand the content and the goals.
Mm-hmm.
You use the word course, but I guarantee you in the transcript of this, if I took what you just said and replaced the word course with project, it
Oh
would
yeah,
translate to any hiring manager, right?
that's awesome.
Understand the
Yeah,
goals of the
of the
project,
project. Yeah,
keep
yeah, yeah,
people
yeah.
on task in the project, use a fair standard of evaluation for the project as a whole, and also how team members instead of students
Mm-hmm.
are
Mm-hmm.
meeting those goals.
So glad this is being
Uh,
recorded.
and transcripted. So
Yeah,
feel free.
yes, yes. Fantastic.
Um,
I'll copy and paste that bad boy.
that brings me to another point. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because one of the things that I have found that really hinders folks moving from the academic world to a non-academic job is this idea of plagiarism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We are so
Yeah.
it is appropriately drilled into us not to copy work without citing, but in the realm of resumes, that does not exist.
Hmm.
So, it is in no way an ethical violation for you to take that transcript and put it
Just
in your
copy and paste
resume.
that and pop it on in there.
In
For
fact,
sure.
often what I tell people to do is if you're looking at a job and you're not sure how to frame your experience, but you know that you've done these things, take their language and change the verb tense.
Huh.
So if the job says provided feedback for, if the job says we want a manager who can provide feedback for employee growth, you tweak that slightly to say that in the role where you graded,
Hmm.
you provided feedback for team member growth.
Wow.
Because plagiarism does not exist when it comes to the bullet points of a resume. It just doesn't.
Which makes sense. I mean, and that's also,
Right.
because I'm always thinking about like the what is that called? The ATS um
Mm-hmm.
system, and how, always trying to word things just perfectly, but it's like take a minute and, and kind of consider who is going to be reading, the
Correct.
material. Um yeah, I think that's really, yeah, like the whole, like, I guess I'm just trying to process, like, whoa, that's true, like like plagiarism in that way does not exist in a resume.
It doesn't. They want their words mirrored back to them. Not, and I will give them credit. It's not in a gratuitous narcissistic way of like,
Hmm.
your hiring manager is not imagining that they put this the most perfect way that it could ever be said.
Hmm.
What it is they want to know that you understand the role and the company values and the work that you'll be doing.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
know,
So
so
it's an
yeah,
incentive to kind of mirror that language. Like,
very much.
interesting.
Very much. Because, if I'm hiring you and I can kind of tell in your resume that you've done the things I want, but the language is unfamiliar to me,
Mm.
my first thought is how hard will I have to work to get them up to speed?
Mm. Sure,
But if
sure.
I am reading your resume and I can tell you've done the things that I'm looking for, and you're talking about them in a way that we talk about them internally, I feel very confident that you kind of already know the terms. And, humans are humans and people are tired, right? So if I
Mhm.
have two equally great candidates and hiring one of them means I'll have to train them for 6 weeks instead of four, I'm gonna go with the 4 week person,
Sure.
you
Sure.
know?
Yeah.
And
That makes
I'm
sense.
not gonna make any value judgment about that in this space. You can
Sure.
catch me offline if you want to talk about that. Um,
I love that.
but that is just how it is. And it's a very human impulse, not necessarily good, but human.
But human. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's also, it is the way of so much of our day-to-day lives. I mean,
It
it's more
is.
efficient that way, for better or for
Mm-hmm.
worse. Um, it cuts out a lot of, like a lot, I don't even know what the term would be for that, but it cuts out a lot of what seems to be extraneous kind of explanations of things, like let's just get to the stuff that's most useful right now at this time.
Yes. Absolutely. And that's what corporations are looking for, whether they're
Yeah.
big or small. That is very
Efficiency,
much
I
what they're
guess, is what
looking
I'm trying to
for.
say. Yeah. Yeah,
Yes. Um,
for sure.
so after we had a call, which was delightful, you
Indeed.
made some changes to your resume, and I thought that they were absolutely brilliant. I'm probably biased, but
Thank you.
but I thought they were fantastic. In the sense that you condensed a lot of your experience. So, I know when we met on our call, we talked about the difference between a functional and a chronological resume.
Correct.
Um,
Yes.
and it feels, when I'm looking at your newest resume, it feels like you split the difference a little bit. Um, so what I see, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that you highlighted the most recent experiences that you've had and condensed under them kind of the skills or the functions that most represent those pieces, but also reflect things that you've done for many years.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. I think I tried to split the difference between the two, because I think, like we discussed, it's really, um, it was a struggle. It was initially a
For
struggle to
sure.
get things to condense such, 2 decades worth of professional experience in the academy to something more palatable to non-academic industries. So yeah, so I was just really, I think for me, one of the things that was very helpful when we talk about, I'm sorry, what was the term that you used for the different types of resume, whether it was,
Oh, functional and chronological.
yeah, so I think with the functional, like, because I'm more accustomed to a chronological resume
Mm-hmm.
because most CVs are both, they're chronological and
Yep.
they're very much focused on education and
Mm-hmm.
credentials and things like that. And so I think with a functional resume, you do kind of have to split the difference and translate that experience, that chronology into something that's more functional and upfront and more in a way kind of sharp. Like you're taking, there is still a narrative there, but instead of that narrative being chronological, it's more about the impact of those experiences. What were the skills gained? What were the, what's the, how do we best apply um, these experiences to translate them into, the requirements of the job. So yeah, I think that is what I tried to do when I skimmed through. I mean, I have to say, I'm kind of impressed because it went from
As
a
you
seven
should
page,
be.
to a 2 pager. That's pretty.
Yeah.
That's. I mean, there's definitely some stuff I think that I'd love to chat with you more in
Mm-hmm.
terms of refining for different audiences. But I'm kind of impressed with myself. I've never looked at them side by side
Yeah.
before, and I'm looking at them side by side now, and I'm like, wow, that took a lot of that took a lot of work. So yeah.
Yes. I think you should be impressed with yourself. I'll tell you, one of the things that I am impressed with is even though the overall document is much shorter,
Hmm.
your list of kind of skills that you bring to a job is much longer. And the reason that I'm so impressed with
That's
that
true. Yeah.
is because that is often the biggest challenge for folks. Excuse me. So I call this, there's got to be a better name for it, and I'll figure it out someday. But the way that I explain this concept right now, I call it unbaking the cake.
Oh.
So when you are professionalized as an academic,
Hmm.
whether it be, a master's student or a PhD, if you go through that process of professionalization, all people care about is the cake at the end, whether that is your
Right.
dissertation, your master's thesis, your master's comps, whatever it might be. And so going through this process, you're doing all kinds of things, right? You
Yeah.
are, and I could go really deep into a very like story like analogy here, but you're gathering the ingredients, you're mixing them together, you're making the
Hmm.
cake, you're decorating the cake. All people care about is the cake. And at the end, you have this thing, whatever the cake symbolizes, a
Yeah.
dissertation, a master's thesis, comprehensive exams. And then you turn around and someone asks you, okay, well, what went into the cake? And you're like, I don't know. I've been so focused on a cake. You thought I counted the number of eggs? Why would I do that?
Right.
I just wanted a cake. Um, and again, there's got to be a less pastry motivated way to explain
I mean,
this.
I'm sure there is. I'm sure we could call it
But
like reverse engineering or something, but I really
sure.
like the pastry based
As you know,
metaphor.
I'm a very food motivated person, so it makes
So am I.
sense to me. um, and so, I think that that is the hardest part of this process is, you achieve the goal and then you're being asked to turn around and describe in detail what skills help you achieve the goal.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So you baked the cake, you're being asked to describe what went into the cake. And
Hmm.
that process is so, so difficult. And that's why, What I love about the resume you sent me after we chatted is, not just that it's shorter. That's great. That's kind of industry standard. But I
Sure.
love that you highlighted these skills because you grasped so quickly all of the ingredients that went into your cake
Yeah.
and broke them out for us.
And I think that, yeah, thank you. And I think that that was one of the things that you really helped me like fully grasp because I was just, before I, had come to you for assistance, I was just trying to like, I don't know, I was just, I don't know, like, I don't know what my basis for revision was. I guess it was just sort of like guessing. like my
Sure.
like I
That's
wasn't
fair.
really, it was kind of like
Yeah.
I guess this is what they want. I don't know. But
Right?
in terms of working with you, I think what has been revealed is that there is an actual method to the madness. There's a reason
There
why.
is.
I think often I'll just say, I think maybe I'll say this for myself. I won't put this on everybody else. But I know for me personally, because academia is so focused on precision and accuracy
Right.
and, empiricism and repeatability, no matter, whether you're in STEM or the humanities or the social sciences or, organizational leadership, whatever.
Right.
Like the focus is so much on like let me show you how I got this result. I'm going to prove this to
Yes.
you with this evidence. Um, it can feel initially like a lessening of your skills and abilities, but really what you're doing is you're looking at it through a much more refined and sharper lens. You're making things more clear. You're making things more specific. Um, and really, I mean, in some ways, it's you're making things more accessible. I think that's fair
Right.
to kind of say. You don't have to dig through all of this stuff about, the classes I've taught and all these other things. Like, let me tell you, these are the skills that I gained from doing all of these things, and they're applicable to a wide variety of industries. And I think at least for me, I have found that to be a very empowering experience. I found that to be, I think for folks who are concerned about making that transition, like, can I do it? Is that gonna fly? I think one of the things that can help in terms of like increasing your confidence is just seeing what do your skills look like when they are, pardon the phrase, unencumbered from the
Right.
restrictions of academia. That was really that's been very clarifying and empowering, like I said, for me.
I am so happy to hear that. There's two things you said that I would like to circle back to if I may.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I love that you say unencumbered by academia because I know what you mean by that. And
Yeah.
for anyone that doesn't, I have an example that I think will help. So, as I mentioned, I teach this in a workshop 3 times a year. Um, and someone in that workshop said, I love looking for and applying for grants. I would like to be a full time grant writer, but I have never successfully received a grant. Can I still apply? And my answer to that is absolutely, because you know where to look for grants. You know how to structure an application to a particular funding organization's metrics or, what they would like.
Hmm.
And you know how to apply. And that's important because everyone who works in the world of like grant writing or who is funded by grants knows that they are fickle, knows that national
Sure.
success rates are at best 10%, and in some cases as low as 2.
Wow.
So very few people are judging you on acceptance because we know that's out of your control. But even just
That's
knowing
good
where
to
to
know.
look is an asset, right? And so I think
Absolutely.
in this academic world, when we say unencumbered by, the academy, part of what we mean is there is this culture in the academy that things only count if you get something out of
Yes.
it. Uh,
Yeah.
and
Oh
that's just
man.
not the case. Like things count if you know how to do it, even if it
Yeah.
hasn't worked out for you yet.
That's
Um,
brilliant. Yeah. Because so much of, yeah, you're right. It's always
yeah,
about that end result. It's,
right.
we rarely focus on what the process was to get to that end result. That's a really good point.
We really don't, and it's a disservice to ourselves. And the other thing you said I wanted to cycle back through is you're like, well, I guess I kind of just guessed on it. And uh, that was, that was very, I know that you meant that to be kind of funny, and it was funny, but that's so true because there are no examples out there for people moving between these worlds. There's just not
It's
free
true.
and accessible ones
For
anyway.
sure. For sure.
There are people you can pay for good examples.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and everybody's got
Provided
to
you
put
can
food on the
find them
table,
first. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
not here to judge, but you're right. You have to find them
It's when you
first.
gotta find them first. You need to make sure they're legit.
Um,
That's a whole
you got to
thing.
make sure they're legit. You got to check those reviews.
Yeah.
And then you have to have the money to pay them. But if you are in an academic world where you've been professionalized to put together a CV or even just a resume using academic language, and
Oh
then
yeah.
you are switching out of that, there's just no examples for you, right? So the best you can
Yeah.
do as a trained researcher is to read all of the available examples and then kind of guess how it applies to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the best that you can do. Uh,
For sure.
and
I
so
mean, that's
you
that's what I did. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing,
right, you did
because
all the
we
right things.
yeah, well, thank you. Um, but I think obviously, like you're exactly right, and this is why the work that you do, is so important because, it's like I never, I think I said this when we first talked, like I didn't even really know that was a thing. Like what you were
Right.
doing was even a thing, an option. I thought I
Yeah.
just got to kind of stumble my way through this and hopefully if
Right.
I get lucky, I'll get an interview, and hopefully if I get lucky, I'll get a follow up or something like that. But the
Oh
fact
my
that there's a
gosh.
process to it, that there's a re like we the reasoning behind it, and the fact that you have taken studying this and experiencing it and teaching it to offer it as a service to folks is just really it's just so helpful and so generous because because
I'm
I think a
so
lot of us just
glad.
feel like, you're just kind of on your own, like figure it out by
Yeah.
yourself, which, some of this stuff you can kind of maybe guess your way through it,
Sure.
but some of this
Sure.
stuff, you really do need somebody who is an expert and has that kind of, experience to
Hmm.
understand how you get the outcome that you want. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate your kind words. Um, as we have talked about, I started doing this because this was something I really struggled with. And
Mm,
this is a habit in my life. Anytime I really struggle with something and feel like I have figured it out, I have to tell people about it. Um, so,
bless
you
you for
know,
doing so.
in high school I was really bad at math, and then in college I got it, and so I instantly became a math tutor, and that was one of the jobs I held to pay for college was
Wow.
tutoring math because I was just so excited that it wasn't impossible. And this is very similar. So like this was
I love
so
that.
hard for
Yeah.
me, and like blessedly I just kept throwing myself against it until it made sense, and so I am compelled and delighted to help people out. But I do, that what you said about that sense of like, I just have to figure this out, that in itself is such an academic culture
I was
thing.
just gonna say that.
It is.
It
I
really is.
I may have told you this story, but for anyone listening who won't know this background, years ago I decided to build um I wanted to try to build an app for PhD students to make the process easier.
Mm.
And so I did a bunch of interviews with PhD students about where the process was hardest and with award winning PhD advisors. So I looked up all the people on my campus who had won awards for like being good graduate advisors. And I asked to talk to them for 50 minutes. So, I was not pulling from the bottom of the barrel here, and so what was interesting about that to me is I talked to all the students. I said, where are you losing time? Where are you frustrated? What is the hardest part of this process? And unanimously, they said the transitions. Nobody taught
Mm-hmm.
me how to
Mm-hmm.
transition from coursework to writing a prospectus.
Yep.
And nobody taught me how to transition from writing a prospectus to writing a dissertation.
Yeah. Yeah, you just got to figure it
Um,
out on your own. Yeah.
you had to figure it out. And then this is the part that blew my mind. I went and talked to these award winning faculty that were beloved by their students, like widely recognized as the best of the best of committee chairs. And I said, where do you see your students losing time? Where do they struggle? And they said transitions. And I said, that's so
Wow.
interesting. So, do you ever tell them how to transition from coursework to a prospectus? And they said, no. And I think
Wow.
of that at least
Huh.
once a week because it's so in the culture that, like, it's this very weird kind of like astrology girl, like, if it's meant for you, you'll figure it out thing. And that's such bullshit.
That's not how things work.
It's not
It
how
would be great if
anything
they did, but
works.
that's not how things work. And how much of, you know, this, I'm sorry, this is kind of a tangent, but it just made me think of,
Yeah.
like, how much of stuff like imposter syndrome and
Mm-hmm.
you know, self-rejection is because
Right.
of how often we were just never taught to make those transitions. They're like,
Right.
well, if other people can do it and I can't do it, and nobody's teaching me how to do it, so therefore nobody should teach me how to do it. There's
Mm-hmm.
no need for me to be taught. I should just be able to do it. Come to find out,
Right.
there's a whole process to that you could be learning and understanding, but because we just kind of choose not to for oblique reasons that I don't really know what they are.
Right.
Um, but how easier would these things be, and how much more successful would
Mm.
folks be? How, imagine the graduation and completion rates. I'm sorry, I'm stuck in that. Yeah, but
No,
just
no,
thinking
go
about, like,
ahead.
like, imagine the completion rates and the
Right.
graduation and retention rates if we taught students how to better transition between, high school to college, or
Sure.
a residential, like going to school in the place where
Mm-hmm.
you live versus moving. Like, all these things are big
Right.
transitional processes. It would help so much if we taught students how to do that. And then if we, apply it to, like, the non-academic world, teaching people about the transitions from, from one type of resume to another, but, career transitions, that there is a way to do this. There is a way that is tried and true, that works. But you just have to figure out what it, or better than just figuring out what it is, you can have people guide you through this process. That's priceless.
Absolutely. I think if someone listened to this podcast, they would probably get the impression that I have major beef with academia, which is so funny because I love academia. I've worked
Yeah.
in it my whole life. I have
Mm-hmm.
no plans of leaving.
Same.
Um, but that doesn't mean that I, turn a blind eye to the things that are wrong with it. And this is certainly one of the major,
Yeah.
major things that's wrong with it. And I feel compelled to mention that, something like 25% of tenured professors have parents who are also tenured professors.
Wow.
So
Wow.
when we ask why these skills aren't being taught, they are to some
To
people
some people.
some of the time.
Right.
But on an institutional level, we are certainly
Mm-hmm.
failing. I know
Yeah.
I certainly felt failed when I realized that I would not achieve my dream of being a professor in the traditional sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. For sure.
and so I am so happy that you let me work with your resume. I'm so happy that it has been helpful. We are coming up on the 1 hour mark, and while I plan to end on a positive note, I do want to say that as impressed as I was with your resume edits, I did give you one piece of feedback that I'd like to mention because
Sure.
I think it might be beneficial for our audience.
Absolutely.
And that was to add metrics. So,
Yeah.
whether you're doing a chronological or a functional resume, you'll list your thing and then you'll have the bullet points under it going into more detail. And there is a formula to those bullet points. So, just as you said, there is a teachable, learnable process to doing this. It's not magic. So the formula is kind of verb, the thing that you did, past tense, followed by phrase or clause, what you did, followed by a metric. And this is a place that I see
Mm.
a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people trip up. So let me just add, don't overstress. Like, not everything is going to have a metric. If you really just cannot think of a metric for a bullet point, that's okay. Not every bullet point is going to have a metric. But what I will say is that, again, kind of going back to this academic professionalization ideal of it, like, it only counts if you got the grant, no matter how many
Right.
times you applied, or, it only counts if you finish the degree or whatever BS. Um, Outside of academia, there are a lot of metrics that are very ordinary. So, a big concern for employers is, are you going to be on time and on budget? And so, one of the things that I recommended for you when you sent me your updated resume was
Mm-hmm.
add metrics. And those metrics can be as simple as, hey, in the 5 years I've worked here, we've never gone over budget.
Mm.
And I know in an academic sense that doesn't feel like a metric. Um, but it truly, truly is, right? Because you are signaling to
That's
the
a good
employer
point.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, you're not going to cost them a lot of money. You're not going to go over budget. You're not going to be crazy. Um, Going back to where we started with examples of teaching, especially if
Mm-hmm.
you're teaching an intro class, which is very equivalent to, onboarding a new employee.
Absolutely.
If 95% of people pass your class, that's a metric. You have successfully onboarded 95% of
Hmm.
the people who pass through your class to the disciplinary standards for what you're doing.
It's interesting.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah. So metrics can be just, again, people often think metrics have to be this big thing, like, I saved the
Yeah.
company $1.5 million. Well, that's nice, but that's not achievable for all of us all of the time.
Right.
you
And
know,
depending on your background, you never, if you
we
never
might not have had the
your budget
opportunity.
didn't have 1.5
Right.
million dollars, so that's not a
I've,
metric you can utilize. But like you
right?
said with the onboarding example, um, yeah, that's a really, and again, it's not inaccurate, it's not
Yeah.
false. It's not a lie. Like, that is an accurate representation of what happened. I think so much of the work that you do is just about kind of expanding people's understandings of their own work beyond, you know, what we kind of limit ourselves to describing it as.
Right. I think a lot of people, particularly a lot of academics, and even more so academics from a marginalized background,
Mm-hmm.
feel that they can't be as impressive as they actually are.
Yeah,
You
God,
know?
Jamie, we got to do another episode on this
We
one.
do.
So,
I'm in for it. I will end this episode by telling you one of my favorite stories in the world.
oh, hooray.
I tell this story often when I'm talking about metrics, and I think you'll get a real kick out of it. Um, so I used to be very close friends with a person who was a VP for Wells Fargo.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this person worked remote back before that was common.
Oh, wow.
Um, And so, yeah, so kudos to Wells Fargo. Before they were stealing our money, they were letting people work remote. So I guess that's good.
I mean, that's
Um,
good for them.
so she was part of a team of executives that worked primarily remote. And they had employees that worked remote. And one of the conditions for being remote is that you had to go in office for a check in meeting once a quarter. So, four
Mm.
times a year, you had to leave your home and meet with someone so that they could make sure that you were, I don't know, in the country doing what you said you were doing, whatever. And so she told me the story about another vice president who was a friend of hers who had a remote team, and he had an employee that kept missing his appointments, his quarterly appointments when he was supposed to come in. So he missed the first one and he got just kind of like a hey, we need to reschedule this. This is a condition of your employment. This is important. Blah, 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 blah. So they rescheduled and he missed the second one. And they sent him an email that was like, hey, like, again, this quarterly in person meeting is a condition of your being remote, it's a condition of your employment. You cannot miss this third meeting, this third rescheduling. You absolutely
Hmm.
have to be there. And he missed it.
Wow.
And the reason that he provided for missing this third meeting that was a condition of his employment was that he couldn't find pants.
What?
Yeah, he was like, hey, I couldn't make it because I just couldn't find any clean pants that day. Um, I know. And the kicker to that is that this employee whose name I don't know, all I know is that he was a man, um, missing that meet who was working fully remote, who missed that meeting that was a condition of his employment, um, was making roughly $80,000
Good God.
in early 2000s money.
Huh.
So, according to, I'm literally on the US Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation calculator right now. In today's money, that man was earning six figures.
Ah,
And
God.
he missed a meeting because he couldn't
Because he
find
couldn't find
pants.
pants.
And so, when I talk to people about
So telling.
metrics, if you can find your pants and be on time, there's places where that's a metric.
Found pants.
Found pants, made it to
Mm-hmm.
my meeting.
Made it to my meeting. My goodness.
So,
Like by that, we're all rock stars, right? Like by that, by those metrics,
all
we're,
of us but
we're
that
all,
guy.
except for that guy because he can't find his pants,
That guy
even
can't
though,
find his pants.
you know,
I remember
but
being told
still.
that story for the first time as a graduate student who was making, I think I had a $14,000 assistantship that year.
Hmm.
And $80,000 just seemed wild to me. I was like, if someone gave me $80,000, I would buy all the pants.
Right? You couldn't catch me
There would
without
never be a
pants.
situation in which there was no pants for
Yeah.
$80,000. So I guess that's my
My
final note to our
goodness.
listeners is if you can find pants and make it to your meeting, you have a metric and you're doing better than you think.
Amen.
Well, thank you so much for being on. It's such a pleasure to work with you. I would love, love, love to do another episode where we go in more depth. And I'm so excited for your job seeking journey. I hope you'll keep us in touch when you find the position that is perfect for you. And let me know if I can help
Absolutely.
with anything else.
Oh, for sure. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you again. I know I've thanked you profusely for your, assistance and your guidance and all that stuff, but just it's really a process and it's really a journey, and I think the fact that you are so careful and so reflexive at every step has just been really, excuse me, has just been really helpful in my own kind of journey as well. I promise I'm not like crying. My voice is very dry all of a sudden for some reason.
I
But yeah,
understand.
so it has been very helpful.
I am so glad. Well, until next time, friend.
Indeed. Until next time, my friend. Thank you so much again. This has been awesome.
Yes.